Welcome to the Live and Give Show with Dr. Jaime Gonzalez and Dr. Hua Win. Join us as we share our experiences and those of other experts in their fields who've discovered financial security while creating a pathway towards giving back to others.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaime Gonzalez, along with my beautiful wife, Hua Win, and beautiful also Maria Coleman.
Thank you. I wondered how you were going to recover from that.
Welcome to the Live and Give Show. And so today, let's dive into something that we don't really like to talk about very much, and that's fear, right? So, fear is it's a normal emotion, right? So everyone has them, but when does it get in the way of you becoming your better self? And when does it get in the way of success? And, like the title says, self-sabotage, right? So, and, I've had many of fears throughout the years, especially as we've become more successful. I have more fears, right? But are they temporary, or are they still living within me, or do I still worry about them? And then, the fear can translate into some other stuff, right? So some other emotions that are not great for you or your family, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about, maybe mention a fear or two, or some of the background that you have about fear?
Yeah, I'll start with some examples. Hi, everyone. One of the big fears I have is about growth, and I briefly touched upon it last episode about when I talked about the mindset of money and growth and greed, the correlation of that belief. But not just a growth in that sense. I think one of the things and hurdles as I was going through my journey, in my growth journey of always learning and more, is thinking that I'd have to sacrifice something else in order for me to gain something else. And it's not even the financial or the time, but I always felt like I was going to lose something. And in the back of my mind, subconsciously, that's an ongoing fear, right? Does that sabotage some of my success where I am a lot more conservative in my growth journey? Absolutely, right? And, you're the visionary, and that's why we complement each other so well. And so when you plant an idea, it might take me a year or two to catch on.
Or 3 or 4. The vision's pretty much dead by then.
You're on to the next one. But yes, the sabotage is not just on my own journey because we're married and we're business partners. It also slows him down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the dynamic of the sabotage and that stems from internal fear, because I truly believe that I have to sacrifice and I will lose something when it's so good by wanting more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why. But once I'm on board, and I'm like, well, that's dumb, and I don't believe that anymore. But truly, intuitively, I have to believe that. Truly believe it. Like, knowledge is one thing. Like, you can hear people say the same thing over and over. And sometimes Jaime tells me 20 times, and I hear you, and logically, I know it seems to be true, but internally, something is blocking it, right? And it's fear. It's fear of making that next leap of rejection, or if it's fear of I'm having to lose something. But that's why it takes me some time. But once I'm fully, like, I truly internally believe it, then I move the needle, right? Then I'm on board. Then we make the next step. But, I think our growth may have been even faster. had, I not slow you down a lot because of those fears. But that's a perfect example of growth. And that's in our practice, that's in our real estate journey. That's even our next needle mover now, right? It takes me some time to really decide, is this the right thing for the next chapter for me to pursue in time and energy and focus, even though that is my passion? Is it in alignment of everything? Because I'm going to mess up something else. That's my true internal belief, is I'm going to mess up something else because my hand's not going to be on something if I, move to the next thing.
But I guess I'm questioning that as well too. So because you're saying we wouldn't be as successful if you didn't have that, but you had the fear, you are successful, so didn't
Yeah.
you know? Well, my question to you is then, didn't fear help you get to where you're at,
Both.
or
I think both.
did it slow you definitely down? For
I
sure.
think it helped me make better decisions. Like, I had to really get to know people, and feel comfortable enough. And I'm very intuitive. And so I feel like, okay, if this is at least the right people that I want to work with, that I can trust to move the needle forward. Um, in hindsight, would I have changed it? Probably not. I think deliberately, intentionally, building those relationships, even though I had a lot of internal fear, and partnerships was a big fear for me, right? Because we've always worked like you are my only other partner. And that took time to get trust and built, right? Breaking through my fears, much less anybody external from the two of us, right? But that was a total mind shift. So, but I didn't like, I would say fear doesn't completely go away, but I deal with the fear, right? I face the fear where I realize, okay, is this really serving me? Is this fear serving me if I stay in this mindset and thought process? And once I work with that, and it's a conscious thing I have to intentionally work on all the time in order to then say, I'm on board and let's rock and roll, right?
I think that's key, so yeah, you can fear a bunch of things, right? So, but if you don't face the fear, if you don't, come face to face with the fear, um, then you're really not going to go anywhere, right? You can keep on fearing the same thing over and over, but just facing it, doing something about it, quit procrastinating over it, because that sets you up for more fear, and more, other emotions, right? More anger, more anxiety, so how are you dealing with fear, or what examples would you add?
So you said something that I think is very poignant, and you said that you have to do something about it. And I think one of the ways that I do something about it is learning more about it. That's not to say that I don't have any fears, but we tend to fear those things that we do not understand. And in order for us to understand them, then we do have to kind of, turn the light on. And part of that light comes in the form of knowledge. John C. Maxwell says that, it's like you're driving a car and you're getting to the corner and you're not really sure what's around that corner, but the closer that you get to it, the more that the light shines on it. And you're like, hey, you know what? I can make this turn. So the idea is that just facing that fear, knowing that there is something that you can do about it. We live in the world where everything is at your fingertips. Anything that you could ever want to know, you could learn. And I think that just learning about it kind of helps me get to a point to where I can better understand it, to fear it less.
How about you? What do you fear?
Well, no, like I said earlier, I fear a lot of little things, so
One thing.
Like what?
I would say, like, right now, interest rates, like, not going down. Like, they've been talking about interest rates going down for the past, 4 to 6 months, but they haven't done much about it, right? So, because that affects a lot of our colleagues, right? That affects us. That affects, the investors, right? So, it's like, okay, well, you've been talking about it and be about it, right? So it's like, yeah, you already see how the economy is right now. And so that's one thing that I'm fearing right now. It's like, are they going to decrease interest rates, fast enough? And how many times are they going to decrease it, this year, right? They had been saying 4 or 5 times, and that's not really going to happen, from what we're hearing. So that's one thing that I'm fearing. But now, is it because there are other fears, right, that I have? But is it at the point that it changes you mentally, physically? Is it really, really that important, whatever fear that you have, to stress over it so much over and over and over again, to have it affect you so much, right? So, and that's what a lot of people are dealing with right now. It's just like you turn on the TV and it's just fear mongering all over the place. So I mean, we were just huge witnesses to that during 2020, right? So it's just a bunch of fear for everyone. And then the second leading cause of death from the CDC was anxiety and fear related disorders. That's why people died. So if you take that into perspective, okay, well, I'm not in the best of health, but along with that, I have anxiety and I have fear. And on top of that, I'm listening to the radio, I'm watching TV, I'm watching the news 2 to 3 hours a day. I'm on social media about all this is going on, and people are getting sick over and over again because of that. That's changing you chemically inside, and you can't really be healthy if you have fear inside your body, right? So, and just kind of dealing with the fear, what steps to take, right? So
No, I think that's important. Like you said, not having to worry about all the fear. And, as I'll name kind of 3 big ones for me in the past and how I've been able to face it and how I view it differently. And so I think it's important to share not just what the fear, but what are some steps to help guide you if you're having some of these fears, to be able to move to the next stop. Because we tend to be our own worst critic, and sometimes we sabotage our own success journey, right? And so like communication, which is something I think is so important in all forms of communication. And so being growing up, I always had a fear of being around a lot of people. I was always a loner. I was very private. I didn't really feel comfortable around a lot of people, and I was shy. So one of my biggest fear was getting into larger groups. Now, when we went into having our own practices and going to continuing education conferences, and these are all peers, these are colleagues, these are other doctors. But even with that, I was very uncomfortable. I would sit at my table and Jaime would ask if I would like to go talk to any of the other doctors, and I would absolutely not budge. No, and it was a fear of just getting out there, right? And then when I got into the real estate space, the conferences kept getting larger. I was not accustomed to these large conferences of 2 to 3 to 4, 5, 600 people. That was a huge fear for me. I mean, my heart, you talk about anxiety and like fear. I literally would shake, right? Because I would be so nervous in meeting all of these people. And so, the things that I started doing was, the self-development journey kind of coincided, fortunately. When we did real estate, we joined Tony Robbins around 2018. And obviously, when you first go to Tony Robbins event and you're talking about massive, like 10,000 people, that was like, oh my gosh, at that event, like literally, I asked Jaime, would just come to support me, right? And he talks a lot about limiting beliefs and fear. And that was such a transformational experience for me to really dig deeper. So I encourage you to dig deeper and write it out, because write out what it is and these limiting beliefs that we hold as truth, all since we were a child, and how we label ourselves, right? And to think that that's how we are, that's just who I am. That was my belief process. But once you break that belief process, like, no, that is not who I am. I can change, right? But it had to be for the right reason, right? And so digging deeper into why I would even want to go talk to more people, why I would want to attend these type of conferences, right? And until I found my deeper why, did I then start facing my fears intentionally? And it was repetition, repetition. I would still be nervous, but I would get a little bit less nervous. I would keep going, get a little bit nervous, and still happen, right? But it was just repetition and knowing the reason why I'm doing this and why I want to face these fears. But the better thing, you know what the key thing is? The key thing is the result. What is the outcome if I can overcome this fear? What is the positive outcome that comes from this? And who can positively be impacted if I overcame that fear? And that was a game changer for me, right? I was like, wow, you're right. If I can just overcome this, these are the things that I would be, these are my results. And these are the people that I can impact in my deeper why, right? And that was a game changer. So I encourage you, if you have a fear, right, think about that. And is it true? Is it really true, right? Write it out. And is it something that you can change? Your past does not define who you are now, nor where you're going in the future, right? And until I realized that, I'm like, that's such bull crap. Like people see me now and they're like, I don't believe you used to be shy. I'm like, oh, trust me, I used to be shy. And Jaime can be a testament. And anybody who's known me ever in college or as my childhood or even through optometry school will know they could never find me because I was by myself most of the time.
So does the result outweigh the fear?
Absolutely. And that's
right?
why the absolute result and the outcome and the people that I can help along the way positively definitely outweighs that fear. Right.
Yeah, and the journey that you took to get there, and the people that you met, the places that you went, the people that you were able to help out along the way, right? It's about the process, like we all say. It's about the journey, but you really have to look at the process and the journey and the steps that you actually took whenever you overcame that fear, and that's what you've done. So it's not like, oh, I overcame my fears. Well, there was a process, and there was things that you went through, and there was people that you helped, there's people that helped you.
Oh, yes.
Lots
of
so
people along
yeah,
the way.
so we just have to be grateful for everything, right? And that's why we say you have to be grateful for everything that comes to you, even the fear, right? So I am grateful for the fear that I have, so I can actually better myself in other ways, right? And that's just solving a problem. Life is about solving problems, right? So life is about emotions. Life is about, being happy, but also being fearful, right? So at times, but just, you can't be happy all the time. You can't be happy 100% of the time where you're at. You can't really, you don't want to be fearful 100% of the time. So
It's all a part of us. Every
Mm.
emotion is a part of us. And we go through all different emotions because we're human. Right. But
And in
just
many
don't
cases-
stay there too long.
Right. And
Right.
that the fear sometimes is there to keep you safe. And so you have to distinguish between whether it's keeping you safe or it's keeping you stuck. And I think that using strategies like the ones that you mentioned can absolutely help. And I think for me, it absolutely is just understanding that fear more and understanding that really there's no reason to fear it. I'll give you a very small example. I used to want to run to my local gym, do a workout, and run back. And I had this fear that by the time I got to the gym, I was going to be too exhausted to run back and I was going to have to call someone to call me. Okay. So, number one, I had no idea how long the trip was from my house to the gym. And so I didn't realize at the time that it was way shorter than my normal run. So that was number one. Number two, if I got stuck or maybe I got lost, I have an iPhone. Like we have MapQuest, you know, for all those that remember MapQuest, we carry those in our back pocket. So the idea that I was going to get lost, there goes that fear, right? And by the time I actually did it, I was so proud that I took the leap of faith. I ran to the gym. I worked out, felt great because it was literally like a mile, maybe a mile 0.2. And I'm used to running a little bit more than that, right? But that was just a very small thing that just kept me from just taking that action. And yours is way better in terms of who you're able to impact along the way. Because the more that you learn, the more people that you can impact. And then you can tell the story and then you can teach them strategies so that they can start to conquer their fears one by one. But Jaime, I love what you said about gratefulness. I think gratitude is one of the emotions that can really take you and just lift your vibration. It can take you from where you are in a fearful state that is ultimately creating that stress and that anxiety that we talked about and completely transform it. And you become, from having those limited beliefs, you actually become limitless in that process.
It is very difficult to have fear whenever you're grateful. That's very, very difficult to do.
Like at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah, you can't hold more than one thought.
So it's like, okay, well, I'm fearing this so much right now. Well, if you start practicing your gratitude, oh, I'm so grateful. I'm here with my family and my friends doing this show so we can actually, you know, educate and help some people out. I'm so grateful for this beautiful day that I have perfect temperature, that I went out and walked with my lover, you know, for 30 minutes, you know, so, and I am so great. And that's actually what I do on my walks, right?
Your gratitude walk.
That's my 20 to 30 minute walk. Those 20 to 30 minutes, I'm either praying or I'm having a gratitude practice at that point in time. And I'm focusing on my breath work. So, and that's how I can calm myself down early in the morning and in the evening time. And so that's how I can have great sleep. I don't have to worry so much or be fearful of all the things that are going through my head, right? So I have to slow myself down by doing all of these things, right? So, and for a lot of people, you know, day to day, they have so many thoughts and they don't know how to do that. You know, they don't know how to, you know, sit down and be grateful and, you know, have a good amount of breath work practices along throughout your day, you know. So, but one thing that most of us do know is how to pray, right? And concentrating and praying, whatever you believe in, you know, sitting down and praying and concentrating on your breath work. You know, I do a lot of, it's kind of weird, but I do a lot of alternate nose or nostril breathing. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit, but also like box breathing as well too. But also like 5, 7, 8 breathing as well. So the alternate nose breathing, just one little technique, right? So I have this is my left nostril over here on this side. And so I inhale through my left nostril and I exhale through my right nostril. So I can hold it like this and do 4 seconds. And then I hold it for 4 seconds. And then I exhale for 4 seconds on this side. And then I hold it for 4 seconds without breathing, right? So if the relaxation nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, what we call it, it's on the left side of your nostril. So if you can concentrate on that, your sympathetic nervous system, if you want, say, if you're going to go into a basketball game, right, and you want to be hyped up, then you would do a lot of right nostril breathing, right? So, and there are times to calm down and there are times to get excited, you know, like probably right before the show, I'll be doing like right nose breathing, right? So, but Yeah, and that's just one technique that you can practice. Like I'm telling you, if you do that for 2 to 3 minutes, 4 seconds, at the same time you're doing the box breathing, which is 4 seconds all the way through, and you're doing the alternate nostril breathing at the same time, that'll set you really, really nicely and relaxed. And but at the same, you stack it, right? So I stack it, and then I'm, with going out on my walks, or I can be, just concentrating on my breath, or meditating, or having my gratitude practice all at the same time. So I can just make my results in such a short period of time. But I mean, that's whenever I'm fearful, I do that. So
No, I love that. I actually use that strategy. I do deep breathing every single time before I step on stage to speak. And that's something because, I get those butterflies, or I guess many times as I've stepped on stage, I still get those butterflies, but I get excited. But that's one of the strategies I utilize is the deep breathing. I'll actually isolate myself and go to the restroom and find a space where I'm just by myself, concentrate on my deep breathing, and then I'm ready to go. Right. But that's definitely a strategy I use during that. And another time I use deep breathing throughout the day is especially, I don't do it just in the morning or one time a day. I actually utilize this throughout the day, especially if there's something that's a little bit more stress induced, right? So anything that's going to worry me a little bit, I start doing the deep breathing, and automatically, like you said, it just completely relaxes me and it lets me think a little bit more clear, right? And shift my focus away from the worry so that I can find strategies and resolution. So I encourage you, if you've never really done deep breathing, it's not just like, you
Show us your strategy. Jaime has shared his. Let's see what your
I'm not
deep breathing.
deep breathe live into my mic. But it is, the box breathing that he's talking about, 4 seconds all around, is something that is an easy strategy that you can utilize. But if you do that for even just 2 or 3 minutes, I was a little sick the other day, and I was sitting in the back seat of the car, and I was getting really nauseous. And I said, "Oh my goodness, I don't feel good." Right, the motion sickness, the nausea, and the car moving. I almost had to say, "Pull the car over." And then I remembered I'm going to do my deep breathing, and I did that deep breathing, and immediately I started feeling better. So if you have a headache, or you have that sense of just so nervousness or nausea or something, that deep breathing helped me to be able to get home and feel better and like calm myself down and things like that, right? So there's so many different ways you can start utilizing that, especially if your fear starts to come in. And once fears enter your body, it doesn't just affect your mind, physiologically it affects your body, right? And so every part of it. And then, but the more like Maria, like you said, the more that we think about it, and you were like, logically, we're like, well, if this happens, I could do this, right? If this happens, I can do this. Like those are just things that we're telling ourselves of why we're not doing it. One of the silly things, I think if I say this fear, most people would laugh at me, but it's a true fear. And Jaime knows this because he's Latino and I'm Vietnamese, right? And he's a great dancer. I will not dance because I'm too shy. But that's one of my biggest fear is dancing in public. It's the hugest fear. We'll go to weddings. We're all family. I mean, he's asking me to come dance, and I'm like, no, no, no. And I felt bad because I'm like, why can't I get over this stupid fear of like dancing in public, right? What is it that I fear, right? I have no rhythm. I never danced as when I was younger, right? And I think, and so I met somebody, and they're like, let's work on it, right? And so we kind of dig deeper, like what is the association of dancing, and why do I have that fear that is so strong that I cannot go and over? And so it stemmed back, and so she had me lie down, she had me close my eyes, and kind of the emotion of what I was feeling when I would think about dancing. And I would say, oh my God, I clamp up. I get super nervous. I think everyone's staring at me. I think everyone's judging me because I have no rhythm. Because when I was younger, my mom told me you're not allowed to dance. Girls that dance are bad girls. That was the association. And I never wanted to disappoint my mom. she has this judgmental thing like girls who go dance are bad girls. I don't want to be a bad girl, but that was the subconscious
It's playing.
planting in my mind. And then then she had me work it out like, okay, well, are there times that you associate dancing with good things? I'm like, absolutely. I mean, my daughter loves to freaking dance. And she's a good dancer. She has rhythm, right? But my mom, when she sees her dance, she like loves it, right? And she goes, well, do you internally believe that if you were to dance, that you're a bad person? I'm like, no, of course not, right? And then she goes, well, if you did break your fear of dancing, what would be the positive outcome of that? Right? Again, kind of that similar exercise. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think my husband would really enjoy me having more fun socially with him. And I would feel so much more fun. And I think it'll boost my self-confidence. Right? And she's like, yeah, you're right. And so after that, she spent about an hour with me, right? Going through this and bringing it to light and how silly that fear was, right? And so after that, we were at a retreat with a group of women. And so then we started dancing together, right? And she goes, how does that feel? I'm like, it's fun. And she goes, who cares if you have no rhythm? Just move, right? And then she started teaching me some things. And I'm like, oh, I got this. Well, funny story, all of that just to say, I was doing a speaking engagement the other day, live on stage. And sure enough, they're like, what do you want your intro song to be? And I said, I want This Girl Is on Fire. And sure enough, I walk out and I'm dancing.
True story. I was there. I remember that very vividly. True story, yes.
And so you would never think, right, of all those years of fear of dancing that I'm like, that is so dumb. Why would I even believe that to be true? But that's a silly example, but that is a true fear that I internally had.
But look at the screen. Is that not correct? You need to just let go. That's right. Just let go.
Absolutely, right?
I want to share a fear and how I've overcome it. And I think it relates very much to the topic of today's talk because it was for a long time sabotaging my success. So back when I was in the corporate world, I had opportunities to travel in many cases across the United States and then also overseas. And many times I would say, no, you know what? It's fine. I'll stay right here. And it was because I had a fear of flying. And I wouldn't say that has completely vanished, but I have learned to manage it. One of the ways that I learned to manage it is via this app called the SOAR app, SOAR. And that app was very instrumental to me because it taught me a lot of things. It taught me a lot about, the sounds that you hear when you're approaching the airport or the sounds that you hear on the plane. Because for people that are not frequent flyers, a lot of those sounds, there's bells and then there's some sounds and then there's revving of engines or, Lord forbid, the tires. And so I just remember just going through all of the steps. And at one point, I remember somebody telling me that whenever you have those anxiety-based fears, that it's because it's the primal part of your brain. And so you really need to switch it to the logical part of your brain. And so one of the exercises that I now employ when I get to that point to where I'm a little bit nervous is I start to count by 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 4 is 8. And by the time I get to 16 plus 16, I'm like, I don't even know, but I am no longer afraid, right? Because I forced my brain to switch from the primal part to the logical brain. And so that's one. But the way that it was sabotaging me is that I was being held back from experiencing other cultures and other countries and getting to know the people along the way in the journey. And so I encourage you to learn more by way of other resources. Case in point, the SOAR app, for example, or the breathing exercises. And it's interesting because I don't know that we have ever in a setting talked about what we do in terms of breathing, but I also employ a breathing technique that is just double the exhale. So you inhale for 4 seconds and then you exhale for 8, or you inhale for 2 and you exhale for 4. And if you have a wearable, so a lot of us here are into biohacking, but if you have a wearable and you actually set it to track, you can see that you could start out with 120 beats per minute where you're really, really very elevated. And then by the time you get done with a 10-minute breathing exercise, you're back down to the 60 range,
right,
or even better. So I definitely agree with the breathing technique being one of the
So,
methods.
talking about breathing, of Wim Hof. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Wim Hof. Well, we had one person where was he coming flying in from?
In Switzerland.
In Switzerland. So he's a master also that trained with um,
Wim Hof.
Wim Hof. And we did a session. It was a group of maybe 8 of us. And it was an all-day event. And it wasn't just like a few seconds of breathing or a few minutes of breathing. It was like
Hours
of deep, deep breathing, right? But he had us do some physical, like we went outside and he would have us do some physical exercise of what our capability was, right? Like push-ups or whatever, right? And then he had us do this deep breathing exercise and he had us repeat the same thing. I more than doubled what I was able to do after my deep breathing. Everybody was able to elevate so much more after their deep breathing, right? It was crazy.
Yeah, I was able to, the first time that we did that before breathing, I was able to like hold my breath for like 55 seconds or something like that. And whenever we did the deep breathing, it was 4 minutes and 5 seconds. I'm like, am I going to die? But he was like,
your brain won't let you do that.
It's like, no, you'll pass out, but you won't die, right? No, but that's a lot of it is getting the amount of oxygen in your bloodstream. But at the same time, is a lot of it is mental too, because you don't know your limit, right? You don't know how far you can go, right? And some people they're born like some of these rock climbers not to have fear, and that's what they do. They're missing, something in their DNA that allows them not to be fearful, right? So, I mean, if we had a turn off and on switch, that would be pretty cool, right?
Turn the fear off button.
Yeah.
Just breathe. Fear off.
Another, I was just thinking, another fear that you used to have, early on.
I have many.
Early on was just like simple stuff like trying out new food, right? You stuck with your 10 things to eat, all Vietnamese food, and not trying anything else. But now it's like we've traveled like so much, and it's like I don't know what you would have done if you would have stuck with your top 10. So yeah, that would have been pretty difficult.
I know. It's a because it's fear of like, well, I don't want to waste, like if we're going out, especially if we're going out to a restaurant, I don't want to waste money. I'm a big stickler of not wasting food. And I didn't want to order something and risk not liking the dish. If I knew that this is something, if I order, I would like, and I wouldn't waste my food and I wouldn't have to force it down. Right. But that was the fear. Like, I don't want to try something else because I probably don't like that and have no interest in trying. Why would I not just stick with what I know and know that I will like it? Right. But that was the mindset. Right. But I wouldn't have expanded my palate and try new different foods. And thank God, because we travel the world now and we eat, and the food is the big driver, right? We love the diversity and trying new foods, but that stemmed from the mind. It was all a mind shift. Can you imagine the limiting of places that I'd be able to enjoy, traveling to all the different countries and trying to look for Vietnamese food all the time? I mean, I had to break out of that, right?
So I have a question. Do y'all think more fearful people are more conservative people, or does that really not play into one another?
I think absolutely. I absolutely think that people that are more fearful tend to be more conservative, and I can put myself in that category. I think it was a few episodes back when you guys were talking about how Athena is very much an active child, and Dr. Hua is the one that would most likely keep her back, while Dr. Hyman is like, hey, let her go, let her free, let her do. And for me, I can absolutely agree that when I'm watching the kiddos, I'm like, well, don't do that and be careful with that, And so I tend to be one that, now, in terms of conservatism, even earlier we were talking about culturally, right? I think there are some things that keep me from doing things because it's cultural. And so I would say that not only are people that are fearful also conservative, but also because certain countries and where you come from. I have a friend, Marianne Pina Frochman. She actually does this thing called the Latino Career Assessment. And that actually takes into consideration your culture, and it tries to identify based on your culture why you behave the way that you do, for example, in the workplace. And that's good for you as a person to identify where you would most likely fit career-wise, or from a managerial perspective on where to place people. So I think cultural is another.
It does. I think that's absolutely a big player culturally, right?
Yeah, I think so, because you're learned from your parents and your environment whenever you're young, and that's where I was going to go after ask the question about the young children. Right? It's we put our fears upon them, and we give them those limiting beliefs, right? Immediately, because we want the best for them. But whenever you're born, you're not really scared of anything, right? And it's they've done research on all this, and you might be scared of just noises, but that's pretty much it. You're not scared of a fire. A little kid would go try to touch the fire if it was there. They're not scared of pretty much anything. But
it's learned fear.
Yeah, it's our influence, right? So you get influenced by other people that fear other things, right? So you can be amongst friends and say, "Oh my gosh, I hate, this durian fruit." Like if people know what durian is, it's a wonderful food that you'll love.
Depends on who you ask, right?
No, but she thinks it's the most horrible thing on earth, right? And but I really respect and the flavor of the food and the texture of it. But even before I tried it, people were like, "No, you shouldn't try that. That is not very good. That is disgusting. It tastes like rotten onions, and like and I was like, well, I'm fearful of that fruit, right? But luckily, I have to thank my mother-in-law. I am so blessed and grateful, because I didn't have the opportunity to grab it for myself. I don't know if you remember this day.
Oh, she stuffed it in your mouth.
She came from behind me and put it in my mouth. And so I didn't have time to think about anything, right? And I was like, wow, okay, well, the texture's not, quite there, but I can appreciate, the flavor of this particular food. And they call it the king of fruits, right? And I don't know if it's the king of fruit, but because a lot of people dislike it. They can smell it from,
but
a mile away.
I'm glad, as strong as I feel on the extremity of really, I mean, I tried it 8 times. I couldn't eat it. Right?
8 times.
8 times. I've tried and tried and tried, and I eat a lot of pungent things, trust me. But that was one thing. I was like, I want to like it. I know people love it. Maybe it's an acquired taste, right? And so both the smell, the taste, the texture, there's just something about it that I just cannot swallow it. And so Jaime, unfortunately, even though Athena hears how much I hate it, she was more open, like, and she goes, "Daddy, let me try it." Right. And so she actually eats it. Right. But had she just listened to me, she was like, "I would never try that, because my mom absolutely hates that. Who would want to eat that?" Right. But fortunately, she makes her decisions on her own to decide what she's going to want to try and what she wants to do. And so she has, fortunately, more of that mindset where Jaime is, that she's more open to doing it. And so she tried it a few times and she goes, "It's actually good, Mommy." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." But I'm glad, right? That's good, because that's just my opinion. That's my opinion that I'm putting upon her, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, Maria, because kids, a lot of our limiting beliefs, a lot of our fears, like you said, are influenced at such a young age, and we don't even understand where that's rooted from, right? One of the big fears I had, I remember I was so embarrassed. I have a big fear of heights. And that's not uncommon. I think I know a lot of people who have a fear of heights and public speaking, public speaking being one that they say is the second thing next to death that people fear, of the fear ladder. But heights was something that was significant for me. I would never go on roller coaster rides. I never went on anything that was elevated because I always had a fear that I don't know what it was, right? And when I was doing Tony Robbins, Facing Fears, we went to Fiji. And one of the exercises was to climb up these like it was a very narrow, high pole.
Telephone pole.
Telephone pole.
No, it's a extra long telephone
It's an extra,
pole.
even longer than a normal pole. And you had to climb up on the very top and then jump and catch.
Trapeze.
Yes. And so my group, we were subdivided into group. Jaime, I said I needed to be away from Jaime because a lot of my fears, I use Jaime as my crutch, my security crutch, right? And so I said, I need to be in a separate group and you be in a separate group, right? So that I can face my fears on my own. And sure enough, my group is like pumping me up. They're like, doing all of this. And they're like, by you doing this, not only are you facing your fear of heights, but what are you releasing? What is it that you've been holding on to that no longer serves you, that you want to let go, right? And so I kept that as my ambition, my motivation of like, okay, I must do this. I fear it, I'm scared, but that's even more reason why I must do this. And so my team put a camera on my head, right? He wanted me to record this. I cried, like I literally cried before I went up because I was so scared. And my group was so supportive. And they're like, it's okay. We've got you, right? You will be fine. But I want you, when you have that camera on your head and you're climbing every step of the way, I want you to talk to us. And so this was all, if I can find that video, I'm talking as I'm fearful, climbing up and looking down at this, right? And I'm talking through my emotions as I'm climbing up through this process. And that was such a life-changing moment of climbing up, and it was so narrow. Every piece of my body was shaking. I look over to the next telephone pole. There's 3 poles of 3 different teams going up. I look over and I see Jaime on the very top at the same time that I'm at the top, right?
We have a picture of that.
We have a picture of it. It was the craziest thing, right? It was meant to be, but
yeah, because it was crazy because there was 100 people or 110 people there,
randomized, right?
Yeah, and we went at the same time, and I saw you, across. Actually, there was no one in the middle pole yet because they were climbing up, but you were on the edge and I was on the edge, and we had reached it.
Oh my God! So it's just to look down and look around, because once I got to the top and they had you stand up straight, right? And I wanted to grasp that moment and what I really wanted to release, the fear I wanted to release, and the things in my past that were no longer serving me. That's what it symbolized for me, right? And it felt so powerful. After that, I felt so empowered. I couldn't even explain the level of empowerment I felt being able to go through that. And it sounds like, oh, you climbed a pole, like no big deal, right? But internally, because I associated all the things that I was letting go and facing that and doing that, I was so proud of myself, right? But it was so much more symbolic of what I had been holding in my past, of letting that go, right? To move on to the next chapter. And that was a transition point for me to be like, I'm ready to face anything.
I think that might be a good homework assignment for the people out there. It's whenever you do have your fear, if it's the same fear over and over again, once you break that fear, just coming to the realization, okay, acknowledging that you broke that fear, right? And what did you gain from it? The steps that you took to get there, and just writing it down, right? So that way, if you are faced with the same fear, it might not be so bad on the next on the next time, on the next situation, right? But having it, because we write a lot of stuff down. You write a lot of stuff down on napkins, but you know, other people don't.
Notebooks are fine too.
But I think just realizing, okay, this is my fear, and this is how I got through it this particular time. What did I do, and what did I gain, right? So, and you know, most of the time, I would say, again, the gain of, you know, success or whatever on the other side is versus the fear, usually the success is going to be greater.
But you know, not just writing it down, visualizing it and feeling the emotion associated with it, the positive emotion, like physiologically viewing like you've already accomplished it, viewing that you've already overcome that fear, right? And truly visualizing and believing that. And then the emotion that you feel, because they always say knowing is one thing, but if you can associate that and you've already achieved it, and the emotion and that embodiment, that's what sticks, right? Because knowledge alone doesn't do the trick.
Yeah, because Joe Dispenza says that thoughts are the language of the mind and feelings are the language of the body. So I absolutely agree. Do you think that we can do something fun and just take a minute to try to dispel the fears? And the reason I think that's important is because, let's say, for example, you have this fear and you try to accomplish doing something to get around that fear. You're writing it down, you're feeling the emotion, but also at some point we have to cross that threshold that says, is this a valid fear? Obviously, everybody's fears are valid. And because we're such unique individuals, we each have different fears. For example, I'm not afraid of heights. You can be afraid of heights. I was afraid of flying. You may never have been afraid of flying, right? And so the idea is, so we've talked about the lack of interest rates falling, for example, is a fear. But let's dispel that for a second. Years ago, I think it was in the 1980s, was it, that interest rates were in, what, 20%?
You know, most of the time, besides the 2020 to, you know, 2021, 22, the interest rates have been higher than what they were. Now we think they're like extremely high, but they're actually pretty average.
Right.
You know, so, but just like, because my fear is they've been talking about it so much. And I guess, you know, we talked about at the very beginning of the show, it's like you read it, you see it, people are telling it, and that's, I guess that's where some of the fear is coming from, because you're constantly getting fed information that this is going to happen, that this is going to happen, but it's not happening, right? And so I have to, I guess, listen to my own advice and y'all's advice, right? It's like, okay, well, what humongous thing is going to happen if interest rates don't go down in the next 3 to 6 months?
Right.
You know, so are we still going to be here? Yeah, I think we're still going to be here. Right. So I'm probably going to be more grateful, you know, in the next 3 to 6 months. I'm probably going to be praying more, you know, which is a great thing. So, but yeah, I think I'm going to be okay.
Right. And so I think taking that moment, for example, you climbing up that pole, I'm sure that you were harnessed. You know, no one was sending you up this pole with nothing.
We're all harnessed.
Right. And so Lord forbid you were to fall, so something would catch you. Right. And I think, you know, we talk all the time about the fears that we have and what we do, the knowledge about it. The more that you read, the more that you learn about statistics and things of that sort. But I would just say, to try to take a minute, and even if you're unable to do it yourself, if you can talk with someone that you trust about your fears, so that you can actually hear yourself say it out loud. Do you know how crazy it was that I was afraid to run to the gym, afraid that I was going to be too tired to run back? Okay, so you walk back, or you pick up the phone and you call somebody, right? But it's just little things that are keeping you from accomplishing said things. And we've given a lot of strategies ranging from, you know, someone said it best, the Iceman, Wim Hof's breathing techniques.
Who do we have on?
We have quite a few people. Yeah. Some breathing techniques, praying. You mentioned praying earlier. If you close your eyes, the first thing that happens is that your shoulders start to relax, right? And then if you're cognizant about it, if you're knowledgeable, you can say, okay, now your tongue is naturally up at the roof of your mouth. If you lower your tongue down, now your jaws begin to relax. when you start to breathe, now your parasympathetic is in motion and you're reducing your heart rate. And all of those things are helping you with anxiety. They say that depression is because you're living in the past. Anxiety is because you're living in the future. And so if you just take a moment to just be still, be still and breathe, now you can be in the present and start to allow these things to rise up so that you can switch from that primal brain to the frontal lobe and then just start to be logical about what is really happening and why am I really afraid. We talked about the comfort zone, the conservatism. I think it's also switched. I think fear kind of keeps us there as well because it keeps us comfortable. Our thoughts that are replaying the same ability that we have to create good thoughts and bad thoughts, just leverage the ability to create good thoughts.
Right. So if you guys are watching, type in the comments some of your fears, and maybe if one of us have had a similar fear, that we can kind of maybe walk you through our process and how we maybe dispelled that or overcame some of that, right? Fears come in so many formats, but you'd be surprised how even one fear, when you can face it and overcome it, or maybe even if you don't overcome it 100%, but you continue to face it and do it anyway, right? But what's been the positive outcome of that? And I think that's really in reflection, like Jaime said, if you can think back maybe of a fear that you have already overcome and stack the wins of your fears that you've been able to overcome and think back, well, that was really silly if I had that fear, but now I'm not scared of that anymore, or I'm still scared, but like I've done it so many times that I'm definitely less. It was maybe 100 before, a fear of a number 1 to 100, and maybe now it's only 20, right? And so those are things. I think reflection is another good strategy of being able to, face some of those fears. Another one I would say, just a fear that's probably sabotaged my journey, is a fear of trust, right? I had a huge trust issue growing up. And that was probably a big limiting, not just in business, but obviously in relationships. And so having trust issues and fear of someone being able to break my heart or break my trust, or like that was a big issue growing up, right? And so again, I think finding people in your inner circle and your relationship really impacts that. When you're finally able to go from a negative experience to positive experience, to be like, you know what? Maybe, if I didn't trust Jaime, I wouldn't be with him today and I wouldn't have grown as much as I've done today, right? So that was a big reflection. So moving on to business, when I was like, well, I don't really want to have a lot of people in my inner circle of people doing business, because more than likely I hear so much negativity about screwed up partnerships or businesses and things of that nature. And I've been taught that by my mom always. She's like, if you're an entrepreneur, just work for yourself. Don't ever partner with anybody. It's a lot of headache. They'll steal your money, or there's a lot of drama involved. And that seed was planted and ingrained in my mind at a very young age. So doing what we do now in the multifamily space and apartment investing, it's all about teams and partnerships. And so can you imagine how hard that was for me to be able to trust somebody else to do business with? Right? And this is not a mere few dollars. You're talking millions of dollars, right? And doing business. It's like a marriage, right? And so, but if I had not gone past the fear of being able to trust people, yes, trust and verify. I always still very cautious on who I let in my inner world to be able to trust. But if I hold on to that fear, it wasn't serving me. It wasn't serving me to be able to open my heart, open my mind, to be able to collaborate and leverage. And that was the big lesson that I learned, that I had to let go of and keep facing that I would do all my due diligence in the trust process. Yes, I'm slow at it. It takes me time. But I'm okay with that. I'm at least moving in the right direction. So I always say progress over perfection
Mm-hmm.
with it. But that was a huge thing for me, was trust.
Mhm.
It sounds like it was for Frank also. He says trust was a huge one for him, a huge issue. So, what would you say to the people that struggle with trust? Let's, for just a second, just to make the distinction between a personal relationship versus a business relationship. At the end of the day, what if they break your trust? What then happens?
And that has happened many
Many
of times. But, we look at it in reflection now where, um, it happened for a reason, right? And it wasn't meant to be. But those were lessons learned. And every single time that trust was broken, we had better opportunities. So it was all a blessing in disguise. So if something like that just meant that that person wasn't meant to be part of our life and wasn't meant to be part of our inner circle. And we grew from that. We learned lessons from that. But every single time it was a better opportunity, right? It saved us really, right? And
Mhm.
so we, and those are exercises that we forgive. We're grateful for them. They're no longer part of our life, but we have moved on, right? And so that's negative energy, but those are lessons learned. Now, could we have done the opposite and been like, oh my gosh, these people who we trusted, we looked up to them, they now, or they deceived us or something like that? Could we have then decided no, like, and view everybody as such? We could have, but that wouldn't have served us, right? That would not serve us to view, even if it's a bad relationship. If I viewed every relationship in my personal life because of that, I would have a problem, right? I would not be able to trust Jaime in order to truly open my heart. And yes, it took time, but we moved in that direction. And that's why we get closer now, right? But it was a trust issue, right? But I encourage you that if you have trust issues and you've been wronged, and I assure you, you will be wronged. If you haven't already, probably everybody watching has been done wrong some way, personally or professionally, right? And if you are blessed that you haven't yet, trust me, you will. And it comes with the journey.
Yeah.
It comes with the territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about how you respond, your story behind it, and what are you going to do to move forward from that? And that was the biggest lesson I learned, is I cannot live in my past. I cannot live with, okay, well, that happened to me and that was a negative experience, and so the next person's going to do the same. I can't make that assumption. That would not serve me well moving forward, and that would not be fair to the other people that I'm meeting into my circle, right? So
Yeah.
Anything else we want to add?
I want to thank the guys that joined us today. I see
A lot of-
Tan also, and Christian.
A lot of people commented.
Yeah.
and Frankie.
Yeah, Frankie. So thank y'all for joining and just being part of the show. If there's anything that you guys want to share, feel free to do so in the comments. We're always looking for topics that not only are relevant, but we don't spend any time usually talking beforehand. So what you're getting is real and raw, and their experiences. We're learning from each other in the process as well. And so we appreciate you joining us on this episode for sure. Lots of good
And like I
tips.
said, like, if there's topics that you would be interested in hearing us talk about in future episodes, please let us know, write comments and let us know what other things, because it's really intuitive for us. We did our morning walk and decided what's on our heart today, and that's what we're going to talk about, right? And so, but if you plant some seeds for us, then we'll dream about it and we'll talk about it.
No, and that's helping me with, with my fear of, always trying to be prepared, right?
Mhm.
It's like,
oh my God, that's a big one for him.
yeah, I forgot to mention that, but I like to be prepared. But this show, it's because whenever Hua's like, okay, well, we're going to talk about this. I'm like, okay, well,
We're ready.
you're telling me like 15 minutes before the show, but no, that's helped me. And I'm grateful for that, you know? So just kind of going with the flow, going with what I'm feeling, what I'm passionate about, what's on our minds, you know, just to kind of share to the group. And, you know, we've had a lot of great feedback already from a lot of people. So we want to always thank you guys for tuning in. We're always here, or I would say not always, but if we're traveling somewhere, we'll be here Mondays at 11 a.m. Central.
And you know what, Jaime, before we go, Frank, let's talk about that real quick. He says, how do you differentiate between those who genuinely want to be around you for you, as opposed to someone with ulterior motives? Do y'all have something to say on that? I think we all have something to chime in.
Why don't you start,
Okay.
Maria?
And I, first of all, I want to thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing that, because I think sometimes people struggle with those things and may not be capable of really articulating it. So thank you for bringing that. What I'm going to say is it's two parts. I think one is something that you can, actually both are things that you can control. Being authentic. So really being the person that you are here to be, with your purpose, with your passions, with your quirkiness, you know, everything that makes you, be that person. That's number one. Second, it's a little boundary. You know, people that I've heard it said that people that don't like your boundaries are the people that benefit from you not having any. So if there is something that really just doesn't work with you, that doesn't jive with you, that isn't necessarily something that you are aligned with, then draw that boundary and don't go outside of that boundary. Not for them. Don't be a people pleaser as much as I know I have been in the past, and I'm still working on that. I would say just dance to the beat of your drum, be authentic, and just make sure that people that get within your circle, everything else is to them. So can't control other people, but you can definitely control how you respond.
I think that's great.
Okay.
I think mine's going to be quite a bit shorter and straight to the point. It's, you know, does it fit your core values? Do this particular relationship or this particular person, do they fit your core values that you came up with already? And if they do, that's fantastic. You know, go ahead and continue with the relationship if you want. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? So, you know, for you and your higher purpose, since I know you, you know, you have a much bigger purpose, you know, on this earth, right? So, if they're fitting within your bigger purpose, I would say, you know, continue. If not, I would not continue with the relationship.
For me, it's kind of funny. I talked about this in a group setting in Vietnam, and I said the first 2 minutes of gut intuition. I always trust my first intuition of getting to know someone's energy, vibrational frequency. But also, as you get to know somebody, you start to observe not just what they say, but what they do. And are they a giver or are they a taker? And if they're constantly a taker and they're constantly just draining your energy and it brings your vibrational frequency down, those are not the people you want around you, right? And so I live by that rule, right? And decide who I want to spend more time with and who is just who are just energy suckers, right? And just takers. And I want to be around givers, right? I want to be around abundance mindset people who are genuine, who want to get to know me for me and not just for how I can benefit them, right? And so at the end of the day, when I spend time and if I help somebody, I don't expect anything in return. I'm happy to do that. That's part of my passion and my fulfillment. But I also know if their intentions are otherwise, I can feel that. And trust me, those people will not stay in my circle very long. Yep. So that's kind of how, you know, and you have to go with your gut feeling. You know, I don't know what it is, but I always say trust. It's like what do they call it? Your third brain, first brain, second brain, third brain, second brain,
second brain.
All the brain.
Number 2.
Your second brain. See, I got 3 brains. Your second brain, but you trust that, right? Your gut and that feeling. Someone, This is my test. How does that
Mm.
person make me feel just being around them? If it gives me good energy just being around them, yeah, that's someone I want to build a deeper relationship. If I automatically feel drained or like there's just not good energy, or I feel like not too happy to be around them, yeah, that's not somebody I want to build a deeper relationship with.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you
So
for the question.
thank you for the
We appreciate
question.
it.
But we appreciate you all joining in today. And thank you for joining us on the Live and Give show. And like Jaime said, we will see you next Monday at 11 Central. Bye, everyone.